Hi, I'm Dee.
I'm Jose.
And we're your token theater friends, people who love theater so much that instead of going apple picking or pumpkin picking or whatever it is that people do in the fall, we're just in the dark, like always, watching people, picking at people's performance.
Yeah, crying and smiling.
Crying and smiling can describe the show that we're talking about today. Who are we talking about?
Our guest today is Adrienne C. Moore, who's currently starring in the first major revival of For Colored Girls at the Public Theater. You might know her because she was so fabulous as Black Cindy in Orange is the New Black, and you really have to go see her performance as Lady in Yellow at the Public, so let's go check out the interview. Adrienne, thank you so much for joining us. You are starring in the first major revival of For Colored Girls in New York City.
Yes.
Which, like, yay!
Yes.
It took so long for this play to come back to New York, and what's it like for you to be doing this revival at this time?
It's a complete honor. One of the things I remember I had about a year and a half ago, I did a workshop of the piece, and Ntozake was present, and it was so exciting and nervous and all the feels, because I've known this choreo poem for many years, and then to finally, I remember we were working on it for about a week, and then the final day of that workshop, she, comes, and the second she walks into the room, all of a sudden I said, "Oh my God, there she is!" But it's bittersweet in a way, because yes, I know it's something that she was very adamant about wanting to see before she passed. And so it's bitter in that she passed before she got to see it, but it's sweet in that literally every night I feel her spirit and her energy. Even our ancestors that are on our clothes. I have my paternal grandmother on my outfit. I feel that their spirit, but she said, one of the things she said was she wanted this to be reimagined. She's like, I don't want it to be a revival, I want it to be reimagined. And so it's been a great honor to kind of toss out a lot of the old ideas of what this 40-year-old piece, was created and has become over the years, and put new eyes on it, a new creative energy on it. I mean, what Camille has done choreographically with this piece is beyond brilliant to me. So I feel lucky every night.
So you worked with Ntozake a little bit last year, and you played a lady in yellow, and did she give you any insight on that you take into the character?
She smiled. She was so happy. I got to meet her after the workshop, and she just kept smiling, and she was like, so good, so good. So to me, I take that as, her stamp of approval. As women of color, we not only just speak with our words, but we speak with our bodies, and how we talk and how we laugh and how we cry and how we tell stories. It's all in our bodies. And I remember I spoke to Diane McIntyre, who was one of the original choreographers for this, and she said Ntozake was always moving. She never wanted to just stand still. She never wanted to be that poet that just stood still and recited poetry. She wanted to know how it moved in your body as well. So that is in itself a gift of freedom, because, and I know we'll probably talk more about Camille's choreography, but one of the things that I love about how she approaches her choreography is she doesn't plan anything. She wants to see how the individual moves, and she gives language and gestures based off of that.
So speaking of choreography, like, were you a mover? Yeah, were you?
Was I a mover, a dancer, a shimmerer, shimmy?
Do you feel like a dancer?
I grew up dancing. I love dancing. I appreciate how one that is a trained dancer uses their body as a facility for language. Having said all that, I am not a dancer. I do think I have beautiful movement. But can I pirouette and do a Shange? I don't even know if that's even a ballet word. No.
A LaShange or something.
No, there is a LaShange.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a move, but anyway. But that's what I love about Camille. I mean, I remember we did a workshop with her just before we started rehearsals. And her first question was, who's afraid of dance? And some people like timidly raised their hands. I think I did a cartwheel like me, but I love it, And so she said, I want to make this an expression of your bodies and how your bodies move. And I've done my job if by the end of this, it doesn't look like you're dancing, but you're moving. And I think she's achieved that with this piece. I mean, there are some movements that, for example, is a simple, like for example, one of the things we did in the workshop, because some of the movements that you see in the piece came from the workshop. And so she said to us, come up with 5 gestures.
Okay.
And one time she said, okay, pick up 5 different things, make them different weights, different shapes, different sizes, whatever. And so I think one of them, like one person picked up a baby, and that became a gesture, and so it's interesting how dance becomes movement, becomes gestures, and how they become everyday movements that we use in our life. Like this is one of the movements, and how many times are we like, what am I gonna eat today? I don't know if I want chicken, so I want a Coke, but that's a gesture in itself. So I think it's so simple, but yet to me it's so brilliant,
I'm really curious about the reaction, because in many interviews when people would ask you about Orange is the New Black specifically, and you would tell them, well, we lived through all of this 7 months ago when we shot it.
Yeah.
But then when you're doing a piece like this, where you probably can hear audience members sniffling and crying, how does that affect your process and the way that you approach the work?
It's different every night. The audiences have been incredible. I think when we first started previews, we had a lot of the membership audiences, members there. So some of them were very quiet. And a lot of this piece is built on a communal experience. So not just from the community that we, the 7 women, have created on stage, but also, which is why specifically the audience is built in the round.
Yeah.
Because we do want the audience to feel as if they are part of this community. And so in the beginning, when we started previews and a lot of the members were just sitting there quietly, we were like, okay, well, we just gonna make this show about, us. And it is. It's about us sharing and emoting and relating and coming together. And then there's some nights where we get audience members that are just like, yes, honey, snapping and crying. And then of course that
your line.
Yes. And so it's interesting how the audience completes the picture, but also how, we continue to move through it regardless of how they react. I think in the beginning we wanted everyone to just emote and to be there with us and to speak out and to say uh-huhs and amens and things like that. And we didn't get that. We were like, do they not like it? But then we realized they were just listening and it was still affecting them and landing on them. I mean, at the end, even at those performances, they shot up out of their seats and you could see that they had been crying and, you could see that it affected them that way. So I think it depends every night. And me personally, I've learned how to accommodate that, because they are integral. And even if they are just sitting there listening, it's like they're still a part of it.
Right. And also because you're all sitting on stage for the most part as your cast members are doing their monologues. And what was fascinating to me watching it was watching all of your reactions. And did you have a lot of freedom to just react organically? And do you find yourself reacting differently every night to different
Absolutely.
things?
I think in the beginning we didn't, because it is poetry and you want to make sure you can hear the poetry. So we didn't want to step on each other's lines too much because we wanted to make sure people could hear the language and the ideas and the storytelling that's coming through. But there were just some times where, you know, one of the girls would say something and it would just hit in such a resonant way that you just couldn't help but say, yeah. You know, you couldn't help but have that reaction. And I remember one time we were doing that in rehearsals, and somebody, I can't remember who said it, but someone said something to a point where like 4 or 5 of us, and even some of the guest members that had come in, it had such a big impact that we just like, woo, yes! And we just, oh my God, we're so sorry. We're so sorry. And then afterwards, the director and Don, who was from Ntozake's estate, was there, and he said, no, we love that. You know, Ntozake wanted this to be a call and response type of thing. And so, again, once we got the permission.
I'm very curious about this sense of community because I feel like you've been blessed, and if you would call it a blessing, that recently, both on stage and obviously on television, you've worked mostly with ensembles comprised entirely of women.
Yeah.
And I would love if you could talk a little bit about, you know, how that creates spaces where you can express yourself in a safer way and in a more open way than in co-ed ensembles, so to speak.
Yes, I mean, I think, well, I love being a woman. You know, I think the future is female. But I think a lot of that is because women aren't afraid to express their emotions. I know sometimes culturally, men are not given that permission, you know. But as women, I think we're encouraged to emote and how do you feel and so forth like that. And so walking into a show like Orange or walking onto an ensemble like for Color Girls, we shared a lot of who we were very early on in the process. And just thinking about when For Color Girls was initially conceived, those women were together for over 7 years. And by the end of that process, I mean, they could literally finish each other's sentences. They knew each other that well. And so while we didn't have, you know, over 7 years to create that friendship and that bond, what we did in the process in the very beginning, you know, we talked a lot about our own personal connections to the work, our own personal connections to the women inside these stories and what parts of their stories and their lives resonated with us. And that type of transparency and authenticity and vulnerability really created a very safe place for each of us. And so every night, you know, I think about, especially as some of the women are doing the choreo poems, I think about some of the stories that they've shared, you know, in our private space. And it's like, it's beautiful to see them, you know, work through that or how it, you know, it lands on them that night in particular. Like I remember last night, for example, Jamie, who plays Lady in Red, was running her lines, and I have loved you assiduously for, you know, 9 months, 8 years, 9 months, whatever that bit is. And while she was doing that, I just started interjecting some of the I'm sorry poems, like, baby, you know I love you, I'm sorry. You know, it just interjecting that while she was rehearsing her lines. And she said, wow, that really fed me in a different way. I'm going to think about that tonight. And so I was like, oh, that's an interesting little exercise, you know, right in that moment.
How old were you when you first read For Color Girls or saw it?
I think I was in, it was around my high school years. I can't remember if it was a school teacher or a neighbor that gave me the book. But at the time, you know, I don't even remember reading the whole thing through. I think I just read like a few of the poems, and, you know, I was in high school, so I was, you know, I was on to like being out and running the streets and hanging out with my girlfriends and boyfriends at the time. And then again, when I graduated from college, got back into the real world of working, and decided that wasn't for me, and I wanted to see how I could pursue acting professionally, I was looking for material for auditions and monologues and so forth, and I had For Color Girls in my room. And Lady in Yellow, graduation night, was the monologue or the poem that kind of caught my eye, and I was like, oh, I like this one. So that was what I used for the earlier part of my audition career, and then to now be in my late 30s.
We're not going to say anything to anyone.
Yeah, I'm 39. I can say it proud.
Yay!
And to inhabit Lady in Yellow every night, and to do that choreo poem every night, it's almost as if I summoned it from way back then, from my 20s. So it's pretty cool.
It's a circle.
It is a circle. That's a cycle in the circle I don't mind.
Do you ever dream of at some point in your career having done all the ladies in the play?
Ow, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know if my spirit would need to do all of the ladies, because I feel like even though I'm not doing them, I'm only doing Yellow now, I feel so a part of the other stories that even though I'm not saying them, I still feel so a part of each of them.
I feel like when you first encountered it, like you were a younger actor, and with younger actors there's not a lot of confidence, and I feel like one of the big themes of For Color Girls is to teach young Black women to love themselves and to prioritize themselves. And so for you, like, you're more successful in your career now, you're more stable, and so what's this function of the piece for you now? Is it as a self-reminder? Is it as inspiration for younger girls?
I think a lot of that, and even it's a reminder to myself, because clearly I still have some cycles and some repetitions in my love life, and I'm like, maybe I didn't learn that in my 20s like I thought I did. But yeah, it is a and I keep going back to Ntozake because again it was such a profound moment with her and before she passed, but I think one of the things that was miscommunicated in the first iteration of this production is that, it was a male bashing. And it wasn't that. Ntozake was very clear that she wanted this to be a space for women to finally be heard. I mean, if you think about African American women or women of color in the 70s, oftentimes they weren't encouraged to really speak their truths. And there were a lot of things that were going on behind the doors that they couldn't speak about. And so finally this body of work was that opportunity for women to finally, as she says, sing your song. And so for me, and she said, I wanted this to be a celebration for women of color. That we finally can say who we are. We can express our joys and our happiness, and we can, talk about our love, but we can also find a space to talk about our trauma, but in a way that not for you to feel sorry for me, but just to hear me.
In many ways, the book almost feels sacred, I feel. And one of my favorite, I love Cindy in Orange. And one of my favorite plot developments for her was when she converted to Judaism. And then in one of the seasons, she has some conflict with a Muslim inmate. And then I learned that you had studied religion when you were in college. And I wonder, I was like, this makes sense. Like suddenly, like you have a, like your characters always feel like they are so grounded spiritually, and even in your interviews and when you talk, you can feel that. And I wonder how did that, studying about religion and studying about how religion should not be about separating people, but about bringing us together. How does that inform your work, and how did that inform Cindy specifically also?
I think, what I have come to learn is that, a lot of times, we think we are chosen for the character and the role. But I feel as if I'm coming to this part of my career where I'm learning the role actually chooses us. And it's chosen me. Because when I look at each of the roles that I've played thus far, especially the ones that have, had some monumental success in my life or my career or an impact in this world, those roles really did choose me. And the reason why I say that is because when I look at the trajectory of these characters and what they go through, there are bits and pieces of my life that I've experienced or I've had, and like with Cindy, a lot of people, talk about that conversion scene, and I remember going through that speech to the Rebbe, and I literally had this flashback to a time when I was a child in Nashville, Tennessee, sitting at Payne Chapel AME Church as a little girl. And they would always have this altar call during service. And, people would come up and crying, to be saved from whatever they need to be saved from. And I remember just sitting there as this little kid, like, I want to be saved from something, from sin or from, I don't know, poverty, because everyone was always needing some type of salvation. And so when I was going through that bit of text, I literally remember those times of like, having conversations with my mom about who was a sinner, who was a saint, what constituted that. And so all those experiences from my childhood, were brought back in that moment. And yeah, it did ground me, and it did bring a different level of authenticity to who Cindy was in that moment. And even with, Lady in Yellow, so many bits of like graduation night remind me of my own, graduation night and hanging out and rolling from town to town and drinking and partying and, all bits of things happening and so forth and so on. And so I've come to learn that roles have chosen me, and all I have to do, honestly, is just show up and be myself and be present and bring, the experiences of my life, the truth of who I am to that, and that's all I have to do. That's all the homework I have to do.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
joining
so
us.
much.
Would you like to invite our viewers to come see the play at the Public Theater?
Yes. All right, viewers, we are rolling until December 8th. So please come and see For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough at the Public Theater.
How old were you when you first read For Colored Girls?
I watched the movie version first, and then I read it, and I was older. I was old. How about you?
No, I don't know how, but I got like a picture book version at my local library when I was like 9 years old. That's when I first read it. But I feel the ladies were all so beautiful.
They're really, really beautiful.
But it's a little bit full circle to actually finally see it on stage recently.
I know. I can't believe it took so long. Bring this play around more often.
Yeah,
people.
and bring it to the Broadway.
Yeah, we certainly needed more than more O'Neills and more Tennessee Williams. And
Mammets.
Ugh. This is like the anti-Mammoth. This is like,
Yeah, we don't need the men to be sad anymore.
No.
No. We need happy, empowering women.
Yes.
More of those. And speaking of empowered women, this week on our podcast, we are reviewing Soft Power, the new musical by Janine Tesori and David Henry Hwang. And this is not a spoiler. Hillary Clinton's a character, another nasty woman that we love. Yes. So it's all nasty women all the time here in Token Theater, friends.
Shall we dance?
Okay, we're gonna start waltzing after we stop rolling. But thank you all for watching, and let us know who else you want us to talk to this season. And remember, theater's more fun when you take a friend. Bye.